Thanks everybody for attending today's CAGIS seminar, now virtual seminar. We're pleased to introduce today Dr. Lei Zhu from our very own engineering systems engineering department, and who's going to talk about Wi-Fi log data processing and spatial temporal analysis for exploring university campus human mobility patterns. Dr. Zhu is assistant professor here, and before joining UNC Charlotte, he served as an advanced transportation researcher at the National Renewable Energies Laboratories, NREL, focused on sustainable and advanced transportation systems. Dr. Zhu is an expert on next generation transportation systems in smart cities with broad research interests, including intelligent and sustainable mobility and micromobility, human mobility modeling, infrastructure perception and control, traffic network modeling and simulation, big data, and machine learning in transportation. That's quite a huge scope, Dr. Zhu. He's a member of the TRB GIS Committee, ASCE, and senior member of IEEE. Without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Lei Zhu.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Doc, for the very nice introduction.
You're welcome.
So today's I'm gonna just talk about a little about my recent research about the campus Wi-Fi data processing and how we can do some spatial temporal analysis to explore the campus-based human mobility pattern, which is hopefully can open the door for another, data enriched data-driven process. So it's very nice and pleasure being invited for the CAGIS seminar, and so this is the basic content I would like to introduce in this presentation. And first, I'm going to introduce you some background and what the problem looks like. And second, how we can come up the methodology to process and analyze the Wi-Fi based human data. And third, visualize and analyze what will be the outcome and conclusions we can draw from those analyses. And last one is the potential topics. So how we can, based on such detailed Wi-Fi data, to do some further research in different topics. So first, the introduction. We know that everybody get the Wi-Fi data using the Wi-Fi every day, using either through your cell phone or through the laptop. So the communication information and the status with your phone, usually we say is a client, or the accessing point, which are the routers you use to access to the internet. And also behind APs, the accessing point, you will have the internet service to guide you to the www website or etc. So the Wi-Fi log data contain all those information and archived in a single files. So the advantages of using this Wi-Fi data, of course, is pretty much high sample rate, because everybody got a phone nowadays, and large scale in the campus-wide, where you get a Wi-Fi service on, you should have this Wi-Fi log information. And the second advantage is long-term, so we can keep tracking the Wi-Fi data and keep tracking the human mobility days and years. And this is also a passively generated data set. So with that, we just, after you set up the Wi-Fi system, the user doesn't have to install the new app like some other service should do, right? Like GPS. You don't need, even don't need to using any pay attention when the Wi-Fi tracking your activity, because it's totally passively generated information. And based on this feature, of course, the disadvantages is the data is complex. So how we can come up with a way to tease out and process the data is challenging. The other side is the privacy concerns, because we know that the Wi-Fi tracking the everyday single user's activity, how we can protect their privacy. This is another challenging. However, the Wi-Fi data has been used for a while, and the relevant work and applications like publication has been appeared in recently. So for example, how we can build in the activity pattern mining and infection disease monitoring, and how we can analyze the movement pattern has been studied for a while. But according to the literature review and our study, the limitations are, so most of the study only focusing on the short-term period, for example, days or week, and or relatively small scale, like one building or two buildings. Another limitation will be the incomplete message usage, because some study only using the Wi-Fi connection information as a to represent the activity, which is not complete enough. The third one is that we only aggregated, the studies currently only aggregated level analysis can be provided. So very few individual trip or even the travel mode analysis can be done using such data. So based on that, in our goal, we want to develop a method, or say a methodology, to process and analyze the human mobility pattern derived out of the Wi-Fi log data. This is the very big challenging and goal. So the databases, we have collected the daily Wi-Fi log data files, which saved as an individual XML file from the August 2021 through the May 2022. So provided by the OneIT office at UNC Charlotte. So the data recorded all timestamps and communication interactions. So for example, like a login, logout between the clients and accessing point, which including the critical communication steps, communication status, result, and even the error message has been included as well. So the file size range from a few hundred megabytes to several gigabytes. This depends on the activity of your daily human life. So for example, like Sunday, the activity intensity is low, so we got a smaller size. So data sharing agreement was signed, and a non-human subjective research protocol has already been granted by the university. So which guarantee us that we can focusing on more research instead of like privacy concerns or etc. So here in this diagram down below, you will see the processing overview. Basically, we will do first the raw data pre-processing, AP level session archiving, building level session reconstruction, and lastly, user travel activity generation. So I will go through detail one by one. The first raw data processing, the input will be the raw data, of course, the file. The output, we want to generate the communication actions information. So based on the 802.11 Wi-Fi IEEE Wi-Fi protocol, the connection and disconnection procedure has been introduced down below. So based on the between the AP and the client, several steps like scanning, certification, and association will be conducted between those two sides. For disconnection, basically we want to distinguish the roaming. For example, if I'm a user, I roaming from one AP to another, this kind of things we don't consider as a disconnection. We consider this is a disassociation. We just change the AP, but we still inside the Wi-Fi coverage. So the second situation is the disconnection, which means you relieve the original Wi-Fi signal range and join the non-Wi-Fi signal range. So in that case, the de-ossification will be conducted. So based on that, the communication actions describe the log message details and featuring as several key information attributes like time, type, usually connection or disconnection. Those are the two simple type. And the user ID here, we just recoded as a unique user identification instead of using the original MAC address for every single user. So this is because the privacy concerns. And AP ID and the building ID will be associated with each of this communication action as well. So the second step will be the AP level session archiving. After the communication action information has been generated, so the output will be the AP level session, which describes the state or say a time range of a user connecting to a specified AP. So including the starting time, ending time, and also the user ID, AP ID, etc. So some special case will be introduced here. For example, the AP, you may have the invalidated AP session, which is a small amount. For example, because of the start time, sometimes is earlier than the previous session's running time, for example. This could happen because of the lagging of the file recording writing. So in that case, the invalidated AP session, we will just simply drop because the amount of those invalidated AP session is account for a small portion of the total data sets. The second very special case is the ping pong effect, which is on the right-hand side, this diagram, you may see that when a person goes through a very dense AP setup area, so the signal may be jump back and forth among different APs. However, it doesn't mean that the user or the phone really go between different AP locations. So in that case, we want to do some ping pong effect smoothing procedure to simplify, or say to smooth such kind of effect. The third step is the building level session reconstruction, because we want to aggregate the AP level session with the same building IDs. So the input will be the previous step AP level session. The output will be the building level sessions. So for the building level sessions, we segregated as a two type, stationary session and transitional session. For the stationary session means you can understanding how a user stay in a building for a relatively long period. For example, if the students go to the classroom in the building for about like more than 1 hour, for example, so we can reasonably considering such stay will be the stationary building level session. So for this one, we keep the information as a start time, end time, building level. And for the transitional session, which are the sessions between those stationary sessions, which represent how the person moving from one building after another building. So the issues could be for the stationary session generation will be the stay in or not stay in. So how can we determine those stay activity? So usually we define some threshold like 5 minutes or more than 10 minutes. We say, oh, this stay is longer enough. We say this is a stay. The other challenge in here is that the entering and the leaving building, exactly the time stamp is hard to determine because the Wi-Fi has some range, right? When if you're not, even you are not within the building, you already access to the Wi-Fi. However, you are still walking or moving to your final destination or final seat in the class. So it's hard to determine the entering and leaving building exactly time. So we've come up some solutions to deal with those two issues, like set up the state duration threshold or give an estimate model for the start and end time determination. The second, the transitional session, the user transit from two consecutive building level stationary session. We're going to record the start time, ending time, starting building, and ending building. So this diagram gives you a flavor, introduce you the relationship between the stationary session and the transitional session, and how the user can active through different buildings. So the fourth step is to generate the user travel activity. So the input for this step will be the building level session we just generated, and the output will be the user travel activity. So including three parts. The first one is the visited building sequence. Second one is the travel routes. The third one is the travel mode. For the visited building sequence, in this diagram, you may see a series of buildings like waypoint 1, 2, 3, and building K plus 1. So those are the user building visited by order during the day to form such a visited building sequence. And with that, we can extract the travel route out from those visited building sequence. For example, we calculated those classified building as key buildings and waypoint buildings. The key buildings, which are the building the person stay for a while, for a long time, which corresponding to the stationary building level session. And the waypoint means those are the building the people just walking past by. So the travel routes, which can, as I mentioned, that can be generated from this visited building sequence. So this diagram, you can see we have two routes, route 1 and route 2, which means the person start from the waypoint 1, building 1, and go through the waypoint 2, 3, and then stay in the building K for a relatively long time as a SSBK. So this is the period the person stay in the building K. And the second route will begin starting from the building K and then go through the waypoint 4, and then destination will be the building K plus 1. So travel route we define as a user travel from an origin to a destination building through the waypoint buildings, of course. And the routes will include in the travel path, which is a combination of the route segment on the GIS, or we say we generate those paths from other public available APIs. So the third element, the travel mode, will be estimated by the travel speed and the duration of this session. So the single mode could be the walking and driving. And the mixed mode could be the combination of those two, a single walking or driving, to give you the different meaning or say semantic information about how the user doing their activity daily. So from the transitional session or the clustering, we can generate those travel modes. Okay, so next is the visualization and analysis. After we process the data sets, we want to do some basic statistic analysis to see how the Wi-Fi data can give us the human mobility pattern on campus. So here, this diagram just showing you the daily unique client count on campus. So we generated a month's data the whole September of last year. So you may see that the typical observation, we can see the weekdays always have almost 3 times more user than in the weekends. So for example, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, pretty much you can see the significantly higher the user count compared with a Sunday and a Saturday. So for weekdays, Fridays have fewer user in campus. So that's corresponding and fits our tuition feeling, right? Friday, we have less classes, we have less meetings, so we have relatively less visit and user counted. So the holidays can also be observed through this daily user count. For example, the Labor Day, which is a Monday, you can see a significantly low user count in this diagram. And also with there's a Founders Day, we don't have class on that day as well. So we see the relatively lower user daily activity count. So based on that, another thing is how can we look at those activity in building level? For example, like daily client visit, building visit count. So this diagram just showing you for each building on campus for one day, which is a Tuesday, September 21st. Take this day as an example. We will see that the top 3 visit will be the Fayetteville College of Health and Human Services and Fridays. So which are the all academic buildings? So the observation is reasonable. We can say that because most of the classes are on those days, on those buildings. So the next is the individual trip. So here we will aggregate the individual trip from the daily activity-based Wi-Fi data. So here I just give you an example of 2 users. The first user, you can see the left-hand side. The activity will be the stay in the University Recreation Center for about 2,000 seconds, and then walk to the Union Deck, drove down to the Cameron Boulevard, and maybe pick up he or her car in the Union Deck and drove through the Cameron Boulevard. This is the route, and left the building, left the campus from the exit close to the Harris Alumni Center. So this, I think the activity of this specific person at this time period is very clear. So you can see that the green line represents the walking activity and the blue line represents the driving activity. So on the right-hand side, there's another person, user 2. The specific activity will be walked to the Smith Hall to the Mike Mellon greenhouse, passed by the Kennedy and Prospector stayed in the Smith Hall for relatively long time, 4,000 seconds, and then went back to the Mike Mellon greenhouse again, following the same route. So that's why you see the green line represent the path the user 2 taken. So if we aggregated all those individual users together, we will see a diagram like this on the right-hand side down below. So the blue line represents the route for driving, and the green line represents the walking. So the busiest area with dense route can be observed. For example, we located 2 locations. The first one is the location 1, which is this intersection connecting the west part of the campus. And the many routes interact at location 1, and the traffic signal has been placed. Everybody know the basic layout of the campus, it should be observed that. So the activity 2, the location 2 will be in front of the student union, which is where the driving and the walking route interact with each other. A traffic signal with pedestrian has been placed as well. So based on this aggregated travel routes or path pattern, we can clearly see or observe the busiest location or busiest path. So based on that, we can also do the travel flow between buildings analysis. For example, using the connection daily aggregate by specific day, Monday. On the right-hand side, you will see how those buildings connected with each other. We observe that the strong connection among instruction and research buildings, which are those red buildings, and between the building types, we see that strong connection can be observed between the service building, which are those green building, like the gym, the student center, and the academic building, which are those red buildings. And by space, we can say that strong connection between the academic building at southeast corner, so which are zoom in a little bit, something like this. So the top connection between the buildings can be selected according to the GIS, ArcGIS tool. So the table down below just give you a flavor, say how the real data looks like for the top connection between buildings. So the next will be the potential topics and the next step. So the immediate next step I can imagine from this, as a beginning, as I mentioned, that this is ongoing research. We haven't done yet. There's many potential topics and the direction we can go along from here. So the first one, the long-term analysis, since I mentioned that we can process the temporal spatial analysis over a year-long data, which means we can observe a lot of human mobility patterns, for example, like hotspot analysis, the busiest building or the busiest routes, etc. And we can also develop the new mobility models to describe, we say, to observe the characterized year-long human activity pattern on campus. So this is very meaningful and useful if we want to do some planning and do some, road infrastructure construction, etc. So the second potential topic or say direction we can look at is to generate or establish a campus living lab. So we are ready to do that. So we want to using the Wi-Fi generate real-world human mobility data to establish a UNC Charlotte micro simulation living lab platform. So down below you can see this is a picture. Pedestrian traffic impact can be assessed, or say can be evaluated in this living lab, because we know that nowadays the pedestrian are no longer always considered as a background compared with the vehicular traffic. So the micro mobility, for example, the scooter, the bicycle, and the low-speed electrical autonomous shuttles, for example, those can be planned and investigated based on some living lab as a tool to give you the instruction. So this is the very preliminary sumo simulation tool I just generated to demonstrate to you how you can see the blue dots here are the pedestrians, which represent the students and faculty members and how they are moving along their walkable paths. And the yellow cap represent the regular vehicles, and the red box represent the school bus. And you may also see some green triangles represent the bicycle user, or you can say the scooter users. So you can see that we pretty much want to simulate the whole university-wide pattern, human mobility pattern, using this simulation tool to give you a flavor. So our next step is to using the Wi-Fi based human mobility to simulate it and calibrate it, generate such a living lab tool for the future research purpose. Okay. So the rest potential topic I can think of is to the indoor human activity analysis. The indoor human activity analysis, because I have the specific location of the AP address, the AP router. So we can do the similar building level task construction. We can also build in the AP level, AP location in a building information to provide the real world human flow within the building. Also, we can integrate such information with the building information modeling like BIM to, for example, this is the one example about the Friday building. And then the applications like a building evacuation, if you have a fire happened, how you can through or control the human flow to make it there efficiently evacuated from the hazard. So that's the another topic we can think of. So the last but not least is the impact and the relationship with the human mobility and the pandemic, or say the risk spread. So for example, the COVID-19 nowadays integrated with the our university wastewater data, which wastewater can be used to monitoring the COVID cases daily. So we can integrate those two things together, human mobility with Wi-Fi and pandemic spread pattern. Then we can maybe come up with a useful prediction model for the future pandemic or some disease prediction. So those are the information we can come up later. I think, yeah, that's pretty much all about my presentation. And I'd like to take any questions from any of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is fascinating. Please speak up if you have a question or put it in the chat. I don't see any in the chat right now. Any questions out there?
I have one question. Thanks for your presentation, Dr. Zhu. So I have one question. So how do you validate your results that can represent what happened on that day? Like Fredwell has the most population on that day. How did you validate that can represent?
I think that's a very good question. So nowadays, if you want to say validate, which means, for example, here we say Fredwell, we observe like 8,000 users daily. So right now, we don't have a very good data, ground truth data to say, oh, or say set up the gate, right, counter in the front of the gate. We don't have such such thing. But I think the Wi-Fi just give you a flavor. We say a pattern. Say, Fredwell will have a huge amount, thousands amount of visit. So currently, but we don't have a very concrete ground truth data can compare. But we can think of maybe later on, if we really want to test the accuracy of the Wi-Fi data, we can do that, right? As I said, set up the counter in front of the gate of the Fredwell and do the daily check. So that is totally doable.
Thank you.
To follow up on Ting Yang's question, do you have an idea about what your sample rate is? Are you catching 80% of the people that you think are here? Are you?
Yeah, that's a very good question. As I said, this is very hard because of lack of the ground truth data. We really don't know how many people can come in every day. But we can do some, rough calculation, because we know that we have about 6,000 of students living in the campus in the student hall. And also we have like 3,000 of faculty and staff. But I don't believe they're going to visit it every day, right? So we can take some ratio and do some roughly estimate. So based on my previous estimate, I think at least we can say like a 70% to 80% accurate sample rate. But that's very rough.
And this would typically be every person that's carrying a cell phone with the Wi-Fi on, right? And
yes,
so you wouldn't get a connection if they didn't have a cell phone or if their Wi-Fi was turned off. Is that correct?
So that's a very good question. If you turn off, for example, you just turn off your phone or turn off as a flying airplane mode. So there's no signal. You cannot tracking anything. However, I want to highlight here is that once you are logged in your Wi-Fi once in the system, so next time if you automatically turn your Wi-Fi on, so the detection is passively conducted. So for example, I come in my office today, I never do anything about my phone, but my phone can automatically connect to the Wi-Fi in the building.
Mhm.
So when I go outside, pass by the student union, so I do nothing, but my phone can automatically log in or detected by the union's AP router. So this procedure can be perfectly recorded. We see that recording from the daily Wi-Fi log data.
Right, right. I see Yulan is on, but I want to, one more question. So with the Internet of Things, you know, smart city stuff, for example, down on our ground floor, the vending machines all have little antennas on them. And so I imagine the vending machines are communicating through our Wi-Fi network about, you know, whether things are, did the sodas run out of stock, or is the machine operational, or is the machine got knocked over, right? Have you been able to filter out things that like devices that also use Wi-Fi networks?
So that's another very good question. Right now, we don't distinguish because not only the vendor machine, you can think of the laptop, right? Every student will almost have one laptop. So we right now, we do not distinguish if it's the laptop or phone. Technically, it's doable because we can see we can barely see the device type. But however, it's not complete. So we cannot have a very concrete information tells us, oh, this is a laptop, this is not a phone, or this is a tablet. So right now, we cannot distinguish either is a phone or is a laptop.
Or I would imagine if it doesn't move after,
Yeah.
you know, like if you've got a machine that's tapping the Wi-Fi,
Yeah,
if it
nowadays,
doesn't move for a certain amount of time, it's probably not a person, right?
yeah. So we observe something like that, as you mentioned, that maybe a desktop. So nowadays, desktop can use Wi-Fi to get access to the internet, but just never move, just all the day long here. So definitely those can be easily distinguished. But when you think of the phone and the laptop, it's kind of like not so easy to distinguish based on their activity.
Yulan, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Doc. So I have one not like question, like maybe a comment or something that I'm thinking about when I learned from this presentation. Very nice presentation, by the way. So in terms of the space-time visualization, I found this data set was quite useful. Like you can use this data set to present it in 3D way, and you can also maybe look at in the different time scale. Like for instance, we can look at like by week, like we can see I remember that you have this figure for each week, like different time. And if we can put that in the 3D space time, maybe it may be interesting to put together, like for each day, we have this, the most popular node or something. And also we can look at it for one day, like we can average all the results at different time, like in the whole day, like starting from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. We may see these different patterns in 3D for the space-time routing. That's my comments. And then I have this one questions for how do you differentiate the walking or driving? Because I saw you also including like some student may take a bus or they may take a scooter. And I'm wondering, how did you recognize this difference, like by speed or by the routes they are nearby or something like that? Because for me, it's a little confusing, like because it's driving, it will assuming the object is driving a car, but actually it's maybe in a transportation vehicle, like scooter or bike. So I would like to know more about this.
Yeah, first, thank you very much for your question. Those are the very good questions. The first one, 3D model spatial time analysis. Of course, since we have a relatively longer period, we have a year-long data, we can definitely do either the, by week or by specific time of day. We can do statistic analysis based on those. It's totally doable. And that's exactly our, maybe the next step. If we want to show our result more vivid, more use efficient, that's the one we can think of. Thank you for your suggestion. So the second question about the travel mode distinguish. Yeah, it's true. This is very hard for the Wi-Fi data to do that. That's why in the very beginning, we only have a very rough distinguish between just two modes, walking and driving. Generally, we distinguish them based on their duration and speed. So for example, if you have a higher speed, which is infeasible for a person can walk that high. So we can say, oh, this is not walking, should be a driving. But I understand that this is rough, very rough distinguish may have some problems because, as you mentioned, that the bus or even the scooters nowadays is very popular in campus. So but I want to say that for the driving mode, if you look at an example like this, we have so the different routes, different modes will be transition, start or end from the garage. So that is the building information can give us some hint to say, oh,
Yes.
this is a garage, maybe the guy pick up his car to driving out, leaving. So if we can understand the building information, so this kind of things we can further distinguish if it's driving or just take a bus. But I agree, those in nowadays it's hard to distinguish, give it the best travel mode distinguish.
So is that the parking lot is like key building that you mentioned in your presentation, and that because the parking lot could be evidence that this user is driving a car themselves.
Yeah, we just say if you route with a higher speed and start or end with a garage, so we have a more confidence to say, oh, it must be driving.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Zhu, is it possible to do this in real time? In other words, could you set up a dashboard and be able to come in at one given moment, get an idea about how many unique visitors there are on campus, and of those, how many are stationary, how many are likely in cars, etc.?
So what do you mean by real time? So you want to monitor?
How about real time or near real time? Like, I don't know what would be important for decision makers to understand, but let's say by the half hour.
I will say this is a very good idea, but personally, I feel very scary because if you say a real time, where is my location and where I stay, that's gonna be very scary and maybe. But technically, if we don't look at those, when focusing only on the technical side, I would say it's doable. At least you can do daily. So today you can monitor yesterday. So this is totally doable because those log file, Wi-Fi log file will be archived by day.
So
that's my answer.
It's very good. Thank you. I think of the case in a smart city application where you have like a football game lets out. And if you could use something like this to understand that a lot of people couldn't get out because the gates weren't open or because traffic lights were out of sync, and there was essentially a bottleneck that you could then divert resources to resolve that bottleneck is the classic thing that you might do with a dashboard that's useful. The other piece is, the city is going on it's doing more master planning, and we'd like to understand what constitutes a walkable place, right? Are people walking? And this is compounded by climate change. We have summers that are really hot. Have you thought of applications where you see you could test the proposition that people walk along cooler corridors or shaded areas when it's very hot versus they might take a different path if the weather is pleasant?
Yeah, I think it's so the walking routes here, as I said, that depends on your density of your AP. So if you go through the waypoint as many as possible, you can have a better, clear picture. So how the user goes through this path or goes through that path. So I would say it's highly depends on the density of the AP. But the good thing is that in our university campus, we can do that. We can do that because we have a relatively dense AP installation instead of building and or outside the building. So yeah, generally speaking, as I said, that before we don't have such Wi-Fi information, we're just using the shortest path for the walking, right? So we just say, oh, maybe the guy go from this one, take the shortest path. But it's very interesting if we can compare the real Wi-Fi inferred walking routes versus the shortest path walkable routes. So we may have some observation based on this discrepancy, say, oh, why the people take this route instead of shortcut, because we see the cover, we see the climate factors impact or some other traffic impact. So if people don't want to walk along the traffic route, they may take a shortcut or relatively the same routes, the length, but with a beautiful view or with more trees or something like that.
Yeah, that's great. Do we have any
Thank you.
more questions out there? Dr. Zhu, thank you so much for presenting to us today. I found the presentation very interesting, and it seems to be a lot of opportunities to do a lot with the technologies and methods that you're developing. So thank you very much for presenting those to us.
Thank you. Thank you, Doc, and thank you everybody to join the discussion. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Very good. Take care.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Nice presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.